Hi, listeners, and welcome to My Holland Update. I'm Marianne Manderfield, Public Information Coordinator for the city, and today our guest is City Manager Keith VanBeek. Welcome back, Keith.
Yeah, it's great to be back. This has been successful.
Yes, you've done a few of these now. Thank you for taking time with us.
I'm sure the listeners like it when you have other guests rather than me again. But don't tell me like how many listeners you have on all the podcasts and if Andy Kenyon is a more popular host than myself.
Well, he is popular, right? Our parks are popular.
He's kind of hard to beat.
He is hard to beat. But this is going to be a good one. Today we're talking about Waterfront Holland, which is, or was, I should say, a year-long initiative between three entities, the City of Holland, Holland Township, and the Holland Board of Public Works. And it really started when the JDY power plant retired, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it really created a great opportunity for us to take a look at that being the precipitating incident.
Okay.
Or, what are we going to do with the JDY? But I think we did a really wise thing, the city leaders did there. And we took a step back and said, you have to understand the context around just the JDY plant to consider what to do with that site. But really what we did is we expanded that and took a look at all of the waterfront that we have in the greater downtown area. And we defined that as being the area on the river, if you would, from the Holland Energy Park.
Right, okay.
That goes through the bayou or the area by Windmill Island Gardens east of the bridge.
Okay.
And then going into Lake Makatawa, which most people go, oh, yeah, that's the waterfront. And the reality is we have lots of waterfront, all the way from Holland Energy Park to Hines and the water walkway by Hines. So what we did is we took a look at that entire area and said, that is the area that we're going to take a look at when we talk about Waterfront Holland.
And JDY being just a portion of that.
JDY was, again, it's right in the middle of that,
Sure.
I guess, physically. Mm-hmm. And it was in the middle of that because that was what caused us to come together. But I think what we found is it was a fantastic process to get engagement with the community and to build the vision and the diagrams and the principles that talks about what we aspire for that Waterfront Holland moving forward.
This initiative really took, like you had mentioned before, the community. It was getting that community input, very important, which the city has done before on previous projects.
Yeah, exactly. We were really excited. There's an example of what we'd used here before. So the downtown that we know and appreciate today really went through a similar framework thinking exercise back in the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And it was the community coming together at that point and taking a look at a downtown that was struggling and said, how do we engage the public that we can come up with a vision and aspiration for the future? And that process worked very well for downtown. So what we decided is we wanted to replicate that process, quite frankly, use some of the experts that we used back in the 80s and 90s,
Okay.
Bill Johnson being one of those key people that advised us through this process. And again, what we did is we engaged the public over more than a year, and we talked about this expanded area, Holland Energy Park all the way to Hines, and we talked about, okay, so what do we aspire to as a community as it relates to that waterfront area?
And through this process, you got the community out on different tours of the JDY site, but also you had boat tours so that people could see the whole waterfront area from a different vantage point, which gives people a different perspective on possible uses and all the different items, all the different things that are involved along that waterfront. Design charrettes, workshops.
The engagement was amazing. We went out to very specific locations and groups. So we did outreach to make sure that we targeted some voices maybe that we otherwise wouldn't have heard, that wouldn't have come to kind of the big public invites. We did the tours like you talked about. I remember a very cold Saturday morning on pontoon boats,
Sure.
Almost in kind of a little bit of a storm and waves. There were groups that went through the JDY plant itself on the inside. We had an evening at the Civic Center where we had probably over 300 people that formed groups and took their own shots at writing the vision for the future of Waterfront Holland. So out of all of that, Council adopted a vision statement, guiding principles, in a vision diagram that then became the output, if you would, of Waterfront Holland that then lives on. So as we look to implement kind of the future, those aspirations for Waterfront Holland, those are the documents that guide the work moving forward.
And they divided that waterfront area into 4, I'm going to say districts, and that may be the wrong word, but the working waterfront, the downtown north, water penetration, and W edge. And I don't want to get too far into it, but are those distinct areas?
Yeah, so those are actually concepts.
Okay.
So it's not so much the areas, it was 4 iterations or concepts that basically said, okay, these are 4 ways that the downtown waterfront could develop that would embody the vision, the principles, and the diagram. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, which one are you going to choose, right? Because the human mind kind of wraps its head around plans, a decision that's the one. And that's not what it's intended to be at all.
Okay.
So those are all just 4 concepts: working waterfront, downtown north or uptown, water penetration, and W edge. Those are just conceptual ways that potentially Waterfront Holland could develop in the future that would honor the vision and the principles and the diagram.
Okay.
They are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
So more than likely over the next multiple decades, because this is not something that, okay, we decided on one and then we're going to build that thing.
Right.
Over multiple decades, that gives a visual representation of how that might occur. So residents that look at that then, can move from the abstract of a vision,
right,
and can see maybe some diagrams and some sketches of, oh, that's what that means.
Okay.
So that's what those 4 concepts were. And again, council is not going to take a vote on picking between one of the 4 concepts. It's just visual representations of how this might proceed.
And somebody can see all 4 of those and quite a bit more at waterfrontholland.org. Those are all those documents and diagrams are placed on that website.
Exactly. There is something for everybody there. So there is the 2 4-page executive summary version. There is the 20-page interim executive study version. There's the 170 some page kind of every detail that you want to look at. And that's all at, again, www.waterfrontholland.org. And we also have a beginning video that we shot that introduced the community to Waterfront Holland at the beginning of this process. But there's also a pretty thorough, it's about a 4 or 5 minute video that is current right now, and it wraps up where we are at the end of this community engagement Waterfront Holland process.
Okay. So any surprises along the way? Anything that really kind of stuck out that were surprised the group or the working groups?
I don't know if this is a surprise, but it is something that I'm very grateful for, is the amount of community engagement and the amount of passion that Holland area residents have for their community. So we had great interaction with people. So that was fantastic. The other thing that I would point out is that this is so much more than just the JDY site. So I think the community really understood and clicked into that this is about all of the types of waterfront that we have in our greater downtown area, but it also was connecting to that this is really important for the downtown that we know today and for the future and the interest that we have in our greater downtown area. So there were lots of fantastic conversations about how can we have more connectivity and make our community more walkable than it is today. There were fantastic conversations about the environment and how we can be more sustainable. How can we have more recreation and opportunities for people to enjoy our parks and enjoy the natural amenities that we have and not have it just be on a nice summer day, but be it year round.
Sure.
There were other conversations about housing and affordability and diversity and how we want to make sure that we continue to be a community that everyone feels welcome in. So what I loved and wasn't surprised by but was thankful for is that this very much became a conversation about our larger community and what people aspire our larger community to be, and not just focus just on the JDY site.
Sure. And Holland has seen this, and you had said started the conversation out that way. We've seen this before in big community initiatives with the downtown, with the energy park, bringing the community together to kind of kick off how it's going to be developed, how it's going to, how will it look in the future, and that being developed by the community.
Yeah, I think we're a community that rises to the challenge, right? And
Sure.
and this wasn't probably so much a challenge of, boy, we're stuck, we don't know what to do. It was more the community said, hey, we want to be involved, and we had great involvement. So I think now we have a concept and we have a vision moving forward that we can honestly say, as specific things come forward and we hold up specific opportunities up against the vision that the community created, we can say, hey, we know what the community wants.
Right.
So now when something specific comes forward, we can say, does this measure up to that or not?
So the next question, of course, is always, now what? Now what's next?
Exactly. So there's always that pressure, that urge
Right.
that people want. And I would just say a handful of things. One, again, that this is a multi-decade focus. So there isn't a rush to now all of a sudden say, okay, let's go ahead and build it. I think there's a patient process here that we want to make sure that whatever we do it very well. There are certain things that publicly we can do as a community. So first steps, if you would, there are some things that we're definitely looking at as far as what we would do with public roads, for example, what we would do with parks,
Okay.
what we would do maybe with Window on the Waterfront and activating that space more. But then privately, most of the land that's involved in this overall area, especially that land that's just off of the water, is in private hands.
Right.
So it's not something that the city's going to develop this land ourselves. So what we're doing now is we're moving forward with processes and consultants and hoping to engage with the private community to make sure that as they have development ideas, that we hold those development ideas up against the lens of the Waterfront Holland process and the vision and the principles that were adopted by council.
One of the things that the vision diagram illustrates are the three districts, the Harbor District, the Anchor District, and the Uptown District. Can you give us some highlights of each of those?
Yeah, so that was a great process where when we had our experts that were interacting with the public, those were three kind of distinct areas that arose that said, these are very distinct opportunities and probably areas that we're eventually going to see some change in. So the Harbor District for the listening public out there, is really thought of as being kind of everything from the Civic Center west towards where Boatworks is, where Collin Park is, and where Verplank's currently is.
Okay.
So that's very much identified as a place where potentially some change could happen. And again, listeners can go to waterfrontholland.org with all of these 3 districts and see in the 4 concepts what potentially that could look like moving forward. So the Harbor District is one of those. And that also then connects to, if you would, sweeping up to the Anchor District is what they called it. And that would be more what you would think of as being where the JDY plant is currently, where the bridge connecting us to Holland Charter Township is.
Okay.
And really even crossing into where the BPW has our water treatment facility.
Sure.
Reclamation facility there. So there's just opportunity to reinvigorate those areas. So that was one that we definitely focused on. And then finally, it's the North Downtown or the Uptown District.
Right.
And that's 6th Street, window on the waterfront, and definitely some areas where there's some development interest, pressure, if you want to call
I'm
that.
sure.
Yeah, where I think there's a lot of opportunity to re-envision those areas also. So through this Waterfront Holland process, those were 3 distinct districts that there was a lot of discussion and visioning and conceptual diagrams drawn, and then converting those from concept into possible actual action is where we are right now. And that's where that partnership between us as the public entity representing the larger community and then the private development community comes into play. What we've done is we've set a vision for the private development community to aspire to and say, this is what it is that we're looking for. And then we find out if there's a development interest in delivering something in actual projects.
And with any development, should developers have visions and plans, then they will come before council and go through the typical process.
Exactly. So it's coming to 3rd floor here at City Hall, Community and Neighborhood Services. It's saying, hey, we're kind of thinking about this. Do we even pursue it? Now we can point them to Waterfront Holland and say, well, this is kind of what we're looking for. It gets involved in the technical details of our zoning ordinance and our new unified development ordinance that we're working on, and what can you and can't you build, and what are the standards there. So there's a lot of detail there. But yeah, ultimately it's developers coming in and do they have items that they're interested in building that matches with what the community and the city ultimately said is our vision for these areas.
So a huge, huge step for Holland in bringing the waterfront to the community as a whole, kind of a kickoff starting point, so to speak, but a lot of work by a lot of people, and a great foundation to go forward into the future for it.
Very exciting times. It's very exciting to think about and dream about and aspire to. I use that word often, right? Aspire.
Sure.
We want to aspire to something great here in Holland. I think we have a history of doing that. And this is, how do we embrace the waterfront in all the different modes of what that represents, not just Lake Mac, but also our river. How can we do that in a transparent, sustainable way that really complements the downtown that we already have and connects more people of our community to our downtown, but also to our waterfront?
Thank you, Keith. It's a lot of information. It was a huge initiative. If people want more information, want to see the diagrams, want to read the vision statement, or the 300-page plus perhaps document, it's all available at waterfrontholland.org. Anything else you want to say?
Just excited to be here, excited for this process. I know that there's sometimes impatience in the community because boy, we set this vision out there and
Right.
you want to see it start progressing.
Right.
But I really, like you said, we set a great baseline for all of this, and we're excited about moving forward. So really excited to be here and chat with you and the listeners about that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Until next month, this has been My Holland Update.